Hello, this is lesson one for Photo Editor, and we're going to start off by talking about the Photoshop workspace. To begin this module, you're going to need to download the images that are required to participate in this activity. There are 4 images. What we're going to do is we're going to start off talking about the workspace and how Photoshop is laid out, and then we'll move on to creating an image based off photo manipulation. So I'm going to switch on over to Photoshop, and I'm going to just kind of walk you through areas. So to begin with, here on the left-hand side, this is going to be your home screen. Your screen may look slightly different than mine because I've been working with some different images and they're all down here on the bottom. Once you begin working with more Photoshop things, then you'll also have recent files that show down here. But right now, your image, this area might be just black. On the left-hand side, you have an area called New File. If you click on this one, you're able to create new blank documents to work from. Again, yours will probably look different than mine because right here, you probably have nothing in here yet if you haven't been working in Photoshop. This is going to be all of your recent documents. Then as you go across, they're going to set up different presets for documents in case you do the same documents over and over again. You can also create your own presets, which would be under the Save tab. You'll then have areas like photo, print, art and illustration, web, mobile, and film and video. So under each of these areas, you're going to see a set of presets. These are preset documents that are set to a certain size. Sometimes they're just named by size. Sometimes they'll be named for the most popular use for it. Underneath that, you're going to find some templates. If you have your own Creative Cloud license, you will be able to use some of these templates if you wanted to. With the school license, though, it does not allow us to use most of these templates. If you are on the school license and you're looking for some kind of template that you're doing for a project, you can always Google free Photoshop templates and find a lot of things to work from. Now, if you either don't want to go through all these presets and you already know the size that you want, or you want to do something that's outside of these presets, you simply come over here to the right and you can set up your documents. So here you can name the document. You can then choose your width and height. I always suggest that you switch this over to inches since that's what we work in. Usually when you sign into Photoshop, it's preset to pixels unless you go in and change that in your preferences. So you'll have to make sure you change it to inches because that's a very big size difference. Next down here is your orientation. So if you want to set up your paper as a portrait or landscape. And then there is the artboard options, which we don't get into a lot in Photoshop. We will talk about that more in Illustrator. Now, as for resolution, whenever working with resolution, if you're going to be doing something that's going to be seen just on a computer screen or a phone screen or an iPad, you can leave this down to about the resolution of 72 and it'll work just fine. If there's any chance that you're going to print it, I always suggest that you go to about 300. And then you can always downsize it for computer use later. Since we are working in Photoshop, usually this defaults to RGB just because that gives your colors more option. If you're planning on printing it, you want to usually see it in CMYK, so you can always change that right here. If you're going to be printing or leaving it on a screen, then RGB is better. Background contents, the background of your page is always on default of white, but you do have the option to change that if you need to. If you're working on something like a logo to put on a t-shirt and you want a transparent background, you can start with that transparent background right here. Okay, then you have a working profile here that's just kind of telling you what the color profile is basically set at. I leave it as working RGB unless for some other reason I need to change it or the image itself changes it. And then we'll leave this at square pixels and you would hit create. We will not be working with a new file tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and close this one and come back out here to our home screen. The next one down is open, which we're going to do in just a moment. Then we have the home screen, which is the screen we're on, the learn screen, which is where you're going to be able to find tutorials if you're interested in doing some more in Photoshop. You're then going to have sections of where you can find your files, files that you share along with other people, any Lightroom photos that you've been working on, as well as deleted images. So we're going to come up here to open, and we are going to locate the 4 images that I had you download for the module. So it's avocado, lips, rainbow mountains, and sunglasses. I'm going to go ahead and select them all because I have them all in the same folder and hit open. Now, one of the great things about Photoshop is that it'll open multiple tabs at one time. So I have all of my working images right here in the same place at the same time, so I can switch back and forth easily. You can also reorder them if you need to. You can open as many images as you want at one time. If you get too many, they'll end up being a little set of arrows over here that you just simply click on, and then you can scroll down to the image that you need to open. We'll be starting off in this avocado picture tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and just have that one open on my screen by clicking on it. If you finish with an image, you can always click the little X next to it and be able to close it. Okay, so the area that we're in right now, this is called your workspace. Workspaces can be, there are preset workspaces, and then you can also tailor workspaces based off what you need the program to do. So if you come up to the top, I would like everybody to be on the same workspace while we're doing these lessons, just so that you can find things easier and it doesn't make it quite as confusing. So up here at the top, we're going to go to Window and Workspace, and we're going to choose Essentials. If your computer is already sent to Essentials, whenever you come in the workspace, you can always reset Essentials, and it'll just make sure you go back to the main screen that you were on, that you're supposed to be on. Now, if you notice in mine, I have up here at the top, I have DM1 and SCC. These are both custom workspaces that I created for classes that I teach. So if you decide while you're working on this that certain panels do not work for what you normally do, you can close panels, or you can even open up panels and put them in places so that you can create a custom workspace. Okay, so let's talk about each of the different panels. So your workspace is made up of multiple panels. To the left is going to be your toolbar. This is where you're going to find all the tools that you're going to need. Some of the tools may look like they're only a single tool, but if you click and hold on them, they'll create a flyout box that has multiple tools underneath it. Also with Photoshop, when you click on a tool itself, you're going to notice across the top your option panel, and that option bar will change as you switch tools. It gives you basically all the shortcuts for that specific tool. On the left-hand side is going to be your panels and your panel bar. So in your panels, in Essentials, you have things like color, swatches, gradients, patterns, properties, adjustments, libraries, layers, channels, and paths. Now, for me, I don't use the color, the swatches, the gradients, and the patterns a whole lot, so it's easier for me to move these. All of these panels are called floating docks, so you can move them around and place them in other places. You'll also notice that sometimes when you move them, you'll see this blue glowing box. That's where you're moving it to. So I'm going to click on the word color right here, and I'm going to move this to my panel bar. So you're simply going to pull it down, drag it down, and once you see this little blue line, you let go. It is now on the panel bar. Just like it was open earlier, you can click on it, it'll open it again, and if you click on it, it'll close back down. That way it's just not taking up as much space. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for swatches, for gradients, and for patterns. And however you pull them is how it ends up blocking them out. So you can put them all so that right now you can see these two are in separate little boxes. That means they'd open in a separate panel. or if I want them to fly out with the color panel like they would have earlier, I can simply drag them up and make sure they connect in the same box. Now, what if there's some other panels that aren't showing out here that we still want to add or use on a regular basis? Well, you can come back up to Window, and one of the things I usually have on my panel bar is my brushes. So I can simply click on it and you can tell that they've been added. You can add as many things to this panel bar as you want, and again, they just fly out and they can be put away simply. Then whenever you get your workspace the way you want it, you can always come up here and go to Window, Workspace, and New Workspace. It'll give you a pop-up screen that looks like this, where you can name it whatever you want. Like mine was named after the classes that I teach, and you simply hit Save. This allows you to change it as much as you want to. So if you start working and you realize you should have added something else to your panel bar, or you should have taken something off, you can do that and then just go back up and do Window, New Workspace, save it as the same name, and it'll just overwrite it. Okay, so now we've kind of talked about how these work together, but let's talk about what some of the panels do. So on this side, their properties panel is a very important panel that you'll be working with quite a bit. This is where you can change width and height size of certain items. You can flip things. This panel will also change based on what you're doing to the project at the time. So you can find a lot of the things that you need here. Your adjustment panel is a good one to have open because you can create adjustment layers that can change things like brightness and contrast, can change levels, hues, you can add filters all through these things. We will be talking about a little bit about the adjustment layers in lesson 2. You also have one up here called libraries. Libraries is something that Adobe has started doing over the past few years. They've started really focusing on it. And with libraries, you can save things in your library. You can also share your libraries with other people. So this is really nice if you're working on a project in Photoshop and in maybe say After Effects or Premiere, and you need to have some of those same images or same documents between them. You can also save color swatches in your library, so you can work between multiple programs. Or if you're working with 2 people, you can share those things and then be able to go back and forth with them. I'm going to switch this back to properties just so that we have it open when we go back to it. Next is down here is layers. Layers is probably the most important panel that you work in Photoshop. Everything is done in layers. Every time you copy something in or create text or you paint or draw, anything that you do, you want these separate layers. Think of layers kind of like clear plastic sheets that lay on top of each other. And when you write on one, you can see through to the layer below it. Or if you cover an entire layer like this one, this background image covers the entire layer. But if we were to erase something from it, we would see what was behind it. So the clear plastic sheets is kind of the best way to visualize this. You do have some other options at the bottom of your layers panel that work along with it. You can create new layers down here. You can create adjustment layers down here, as well as do your effects down here and mask. We will be talking about a lot more of these areas during the next lesson. You also have your channels, your color channels in this area. So it's another tab that you can close and work in specific colors. And then you have your paths. Paths are basically lines that you can draw to create shapes, to create designs. You use the pen tool to create them, and so it's going to give you options to save them in here. I'm going to go back to layers because again, this is where we're going to be working from. So now we're going to use some of these tools and use some of these panels so you can get a better aspect of what they do. So we're going to create a cartoonized object. So we're going to take this avocado and we're going to give it some humanistic features just to kind of make it more fun and playful and do kind of a photo collage. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom in and zoom out of it so you can get it to the right size that you can see it well on your screen. So I don't teach you all of the shortcuts through this class. If you would like to have a list of all the all the shortcuts for any of the programs that we discuss, you simply Google Adobe shortcuts or Adobe Photoshop shortcuts or Adobe Illustrator shortcuts, and you can find a huge list of them. If you are working on a Mac, you need to be able to do that because I will be giving you the shortcuts only for PCs because that's what I mostly work on, and those are the ones I know by heart. So some of the important shortcuts. First one is going to be Control plus, Control minus, and Control 0. So Control, if you press and hold Control and hit plus, you zoom in. Press and hold minus, you zoom out. And press and hold 0, and it'll fill your screen. You can also use the zoom tool on your toolbar. It's right down here at the bottom. It looks kind of like a magnifying glass or a lollipop. And when you click on it on the top, it shows you a zoom in because it has a little plus sign on it and a zoom out because it has a little minus on it. You can also fit screen and fill screen up here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some sunglasses to your avocado. So we're going to come over and click on the sunglasses tab. We need to cut these sunglasses out of the red background. And there's a couple different ways of doing this. And I purposely picked something with a nice simple background to kind of show you simpler ways of doing it. So with the selection tools, you have 3 areas of selection tools to work with. The first one is your marquee tools. These are going to make simple shapes that turn into selections. So something like a rectangle, you can make a rectangle by clicking and dragging that marquee tool. To make it go away, you simply do Control D, which is deselect. You can do an ellipse the same way. If you want to create a circle, you just have to press Shift while you're dragging your mouse, and you can create a circle or a square with those tools. The little dots that you see, they're referred to as marching ants, and so that's how you know where your selection is. Again, Control D to deselect. The next set of tools down is the lasso tools. The lasso tools are going to be a little bit more of a free-form tool. So the lasso tool itself, you can draw a shape that you want. Polygon tool, you can draw straight lines. And with the magnetic lasso tool, what it does is it reads tones and colors, and it can go around and make a clean cut just by moving your mouse around an object. It can slice it out. This is a really great tool for something like what I'm doing right now. The problem is when you have tones or values that are too close to each other, it has a really hard time reading it. It also can get a little out of control if you move your mouse just slightly off path, and then you have to hit escape and start over. I forgot to say this earlier as well. Feel free while watching these videos at any time to stop or pause and play with the tools that I'm showing you and then come back to the video. I really want you to kind of play with them. That's the best way to learn in these programs. So just make sure you're trying out everything and seeing how it works for you. Okay, so back to our tools. So that was a magnetic lasso tool. We also have the selection tools. So there's an object select, a quick select, and a magic wand. The magic wand is the most basic of the 3. And you simply can use it and click on an area, especially an area of one color, and it'll pick out that area. Now, if you're picking out something that might have some different area colors in it, it may have some problems reading it. You can adjust your tolerance up here. So if you only wanted to pick one very specific blue, you could change your tolerance to go lower so that it only reads that blue. If you wanted to read all the blues that are around it, then you could push that number up higher like it is right now on my screen at 80, which is right here. And then it'll pick all those colors. So the problem with the magic wand tool is sometimes, it doesn't read all those colors together, and you have to pick extras or use it extra times. The next tool up, and I'm going to Control D again to deselect. The next tool up is the quick selection tool. This is one of my favorite tools. They added it many years ago, but it's been being tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, and it's quite well now. It also is kind of a self-learning tool, so the more you use it, the better it works. But with this tool, you can you click and drag over the area that you want to select, and it picks up all of the stuff around it that's close to the same thing. So you can see how much easier it was for me just to select those glasses out using this tool. Now, the third tool that's in that area is called the object selection tool. This is kind of a little bit of a newer tool. It's not new, but it's newer, and it's still in the works. So sometimes it doesn't read perfectly, but it does read really well, and it's getting better every day. So you can select something, and something like this is going to be quite easy for it to read, and you can tell it takes it a second. It has to read everything around it. And something like this, it's going to have an easier time picking out that object. Sometimes though, again, it reads values, it reads tones, it reads color, and it can have a much harder time picking out the object itself. And it does take it a second. It has to be able to read everything around it, and it might seem like your screen is frozen, but it's really not. It's just thinking. While this is thinking, let me point out another thing with these selection tools. So if you make a selection and you realize that you need to add to it, you can do that simply by pressing the Shift key and holding it and using any of the selection tools to select more, or you can press the Alt key and you can take away from your selection by using any of the selection tools. And now you can see the little wheels turning, so it's getting close to being done and reading this. Whoops. And I hit deselect by accident, so let's go back. So you can see that it read my sunglasses and picked them out. So the next step is, if you weren't working along with me or using the tools along with me, I just need you to go ahead and take a second and select out your glasses using any of the selection tools that you find. Again, feel free to pause the video, do what you need to do, and come back as needed. So the next step is going to be to use a shortcut. We're going to do Control C, which is Control Copy, and we're going to go back to our avocado, and we're going to Control V, and it's going to paste our glasses on top of the avocado. Now, the top tool in your toolbar, this is your Move tool. So if you select that tool, then you're able to move these around where you want. For me, they're still a little big. I want to slim them down just a little bit. So another great shortcut is Control T, and this is Transform. If you forget it, it's up here. It's under Edit, and there's Transform right here, and you can scale, rotate, skew, all those lovely things. If you do Control T, it does all of them for you, or it gives you all those options in one push of a button. So what I want to do is I'm going to tilt these a little bit. So if you take your cursor, you can put your cursor on any of the anchor points and you can size it. So you can drag it and size it. Make it bigger, make it smaller. With Photoshop, if you click on a corner, click on any of the anchor points and start dragging, it's going to maintain your ratio. So whatever shape it is, it'll maintain it. It'll just get it'll scale the whole thing at the same time. If you want to squish or stretch an object, you just have to press and hold Shift while you're moving any of these anchor points, and you're able to squish or stretch an object. But I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller for right now because I want to wait and I want to turn these a little bit. So to rotate them, if you take your cursor out near one of the anchor points, you'll see that it's a two-way arrow, and then as you pull it away, it will turn into a curved arrow. Once it turns into the curved arrow, then you can use it and you can twist and rotate. And you can always pick it up and move it as you go. So I'm going to rotate these a little bit. I want my avocado to kind of look like someone relaxing with their sunglasses on. So I'm going to put it right about there. And I'm going to come up here to the top to this little check mark, and I'm going to click it, and it's going to set my changes. Okay, for the next thing, I am going to come up here and I'm going to grab my lips tab. And again, I want you to select around the lips. You can use any of the tools that you want, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use my quick selection tool. And I'm going to select the lips. Now, I will tell you that you also have the option, especially on something like the sunglasses, where if the background is easier to select, you can select the background because it's all red. It's going to be easy for it to read. And you can do select and inverse, and then it's going to change to the glasses. So let me go back one step. When I selected all the red, you can see marching ants all the way around the back, as well as around the glasses. That's because the red area is selected. And if I do select an inverse, it selects just the glasses for me. So you can do anything like that if you want. If this is easier for you to select the skin around the lips and then select inverse, you're more than welcome to do that. You can also change the size of your selection tool. So you can see my selection tool right now is really, really small. You can barely see it on the screen. So I can come up here and I can change the size. This size change is right here for most of the tools that you can change the size for. So like your paintbrush tool, your eraser tool, all of those will have this option that you can change it. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to use my quick select tool and I'm going to kind of go over the lips, kind of go close to the edge. Now the way we're doing this is what's called destructive, because we are deleting parts of it. So by doing the Control-C and copying the lips and moving them over and Control-Ving, I now do not have any of the area around these lips. So if I did want to go back later and show a little piece of the skin, or if I cut the lip a little wrong, I can't do that once I do these this way, just because of that fact that they're considered destructive. During the next lesson, I am going to show you how to create masks so they won't be destructive. And you'll be able to save some of that information in case later you want to go back and fix things. Okay, so we went ahead and Control-C'd our lips after we selected them, came to the avocado and did Control-V, the paste, and now I'm going to do a Control-T and I'm going to size them down so that they fit on my avocado. And again, if you pull your cursor right outside your box, you can make your, you can rotate your image. You're going to get those lips in there where you like them. And again, press the check mark when you're done. Now, as of right now, these both kind of still look like stickers that we put on top of the avocado. There are ways, once you get more advanced in Photoshop, to learn to be able to create these special effects like drop shadows and things like that. So you can add drop shadows, you know, under the glasses or behind or under the lips so that you get more of that three-dimensional feel. Now, the last thing I want you to do is I want you to come up over here to the image, Rainbow Mountains. This time, we're going to add these into the sunglasses to look like a reflection. So we need to capture the entire image. So you can simply come up here and you can grab your rectangle marquee and you can drag it over the entire image. Or you can do it the even simpler way and do Control-A, which is select all, and it'll select all the image for you. And then I'm going to do Control-C to copy, come back to my avocado again, and Control-V to paste. Now you can tell that this image is very large. It doesn't even all fit onto this image, onto my avocado image. So we're going to size it first. So I'm going to do Control T, and I'm just going to kind of start pulling it down until I get it a little bit smaller. I want it to fit over my sunglasses. So over here in the layers panel, you're going to see here it says opacity. I'm going to lower my opacity to about 50%. That way I can see through it while I'm working with this and I can know where I want to move it to. So I'm going to turn it again by pulling my cursor outside of the bounding box and put it over the face and over the glasses. And I'm going to kind of keep shrinking this down a little bit until it's mostly just in the glasses. And I want to show more of it in the glasses. And because they are, you know, probably a little beveled, I'm okay with it having some distortion. So instead of worrying about keeping the ratio the same, I'm going to come over to, I'm going to press and hold my Shift key. And I'm going to drag this bottom anchor up till it's close to the bottom of the glasses. And I'm going to drag the top one down to the top of the glasses. That way, whenever I fit them into my actual panels here, it'll make a little bit more sense. Again, hit the check mark at the top of the screen and you can change your opacity back to 100%. Now, one of the great things with layers is you can turn a layer off and on as you need it. So it doesn't get rid of it, it just closes it so you can't see it. And I want to be able to select the actual glass on my glasses. So I'm coming over here to layer 3 and I'm going to close the little eyeball next to layer 3. But I want to select the black that's in the sunglasses. So I need to make sure I click on layer 1 so that it turns gray so I know that layer is selected. And to be able to see what I'm doing a little bit better, I am going to Control plus. Okay, so now I have the areas where my images are going to be. I'm going to use one of my selection tools. I'm probably in this case, I'm going to try my magic wand since it's all black that I'm trying to select. And I'm going to click right here in the middle of the glasses. And it does a pretty good job of not picking up the beveled edge. So that works well for me. And then I'm going to press and hold Shift and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now you can see right up here in the corner of this one, it probably picked a little bit more of the glasses than I wanted it to. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool and press and hold Alt. And I'm just going to kind of draw around that little area that I didn't want to be selected. Now, like I said, the lasso tool is a freeform tool, so it's not exact. So you're just going to have to kind of try your best. I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit so we can see what we're doing. You'll also see right here, it did not select this little area because it was outside of its tonal range. So I'm going to press and hold Shift and I'm going to draw around that with my lasso tool and it'll add it back in. Now my edges aren't going to be perfect on this, but for a first lesson, they're going to be good enough for right now. We'll talk more about how you can clean those up using mask in lesson 2. So for this lesson, I am completely okay if you have a little bit of rough edges to it. Now I'm going to go back up to my level 3 or my layer 3. I'm going to open that back up with the little eyeball and I'm going to click on it. So again, my layer 3 is now grayed out. Have the eye open. I can see my picture here. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to do select and inverse. Now I'm selecting everything except for what's inside the glasses. That way I can get rid of all the rest of it. The way that selections work, you can use them to select an area to work in. You can also use them though to keep you from erasing an area or painting into an area or anything like that. So we're going to grab our eraser tool, which is right here. Now, we could simply hit delete and that would completely work. It would get rid of everything except for what we want in the sunglasses. But I want you to see how this works. So we're going to use the eraser tool and simply go over what we don't want. You can see that my selection tool is my marching ants is keeping me out of the area where I didn't want to be. So that way it's going to keep the stuff inside the sunglasses and only erase the outside. Again, though, this is a destructive process. So if the mountains and the sky are not exactly positioned the way we are hoping them to be, once we erase it and we continue working, we would not be able to bring that back in any way. Again, we'll talk about that in lesson 2 and how to do it so that you don't lose that information. So if you're using something like the eraser tool, just make sure, you know, how we did the opacity and we lowered it. Make sure you're doing that kind of stuff beforehand to make sure it's exactly the way you want it before you go any further. Okay, so I'm going to continue erasing around this, make sure I get it all. Or again, like I said, I can simply hit delete, which I'll do right now, and you'll see that it's all gone. And if I do Control D, it deselects. And now my avocado is laying in the sun, looking at this beautiful reflection in the distance. So the last thing we're going to do to this one today is we're going to save it in 2 different ways. So the first way that I always suggest that you save anything you're working on is saving it as a PSD file. What a PSD file does is it allows you to keep all of these layers. It's going to make a little bit bigger of a file, but by keeping all of those layers, you can go back and work on it later if you wanted to. So if you wanted to come back in here and add text or give it a nose or take away its lips or whatever, you could simply do that. It is going to create a bigger file, and it also is going to create a file that you can't just give it to somebody and then go print it, because it needs to be switched to a compressed file for that. But this way, if anything goes wrong and you want to fix something, you can. So you simply come up here to File and do Save As. And you would name the file whatever you want to name it. Normally in my classes, I have students name it by their last name. And we'll do lesson 1. And you're going to save this as a Photoshop file. Now, the second way to save it is to save it as an actual JPEG or PNG or TIFF, depending on what you're working on. Most of the time for this class, you would just need to save it as a JPEG. A JPEG is what's called a compressed file. So what it does is we have to flatten all of these images together, and it smushes them together and makes them into one layer, and it's going to make your file size smaller, but it also makes it shareable. So if you want to give the file to somebody and then go and print it, they could easily do that. To do this, you have to come over here to these 3 little lines, and you click on them, and you do flatten image. Now, once you do that and you save it as a JPEG, you can no longer re-separate those layers. Why is that bad? Because if you needed to change something or you wanted to add to it, this would be your starting image instead of just that avocado. So make sure you want to do it before you do all this and then save it. You then go up here and do File and Save As. And down here where it says Photoshop, you simply change it to JPEG, just the regular JPEG right there. And again, I'm just going to save it as Niehaus Lesson 1. And I'm going to hit Save. And that will be the file that you're actually going to turn in for the module for Lesson 1 and to receive your credit to show that you understand what we talked about. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I will try and answer your questions. If you're needing a little extra help, we can always have a Zoom meeting and you can share your screen with me so we can discuss what you're missing.